Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea Aparicio. I am a PhD candidate in social statistics at the University of Manchester. I am funded by the Economic and Social Research Council of the UK. This video aims at showing to you part of my PhD research, which is about modeling bilateral international migration flows in South America through integrating different types of data. This research has been done alongside Arkadiusz Wisniewski, Francisco Rowe, and Mark Brown. Particularly, this presentation focuses on residence permit data for which imputation is required. Using residence permit data to study international migration flows, it implies having different definitions of who constitutes a migrant, and therefore who is being counted in national administrative procedures. This is caused by the fact that residence permit data are tied to country-specific legislation. Besides this general problem from using residence permit data, South American data have their own issues. Comparing to the North American and European data, South American data are much more sparse due to the big differences in the populations, where we have countries like Uruguay, which has around 3 million people, and Brazil, where there are around more than 200 million people. In addition, South American data are less complete. In terms of residence permit data, missing values exceed the 50% of the information. Finally, South American data are less or can be considered as less comparable and potential lower quality since there is no common regulation to produce data like in European countries. Before talking about the model which solves these problems, it is good to talk about the data structure. Basically, migration flow data can be seen as a two-level data. And at level 1, we have repeated measures from T sub 1 to T sub 20, where T sub 1 is 2000 and T sub 20 is 2019. These repeated measures are nested within each one of the South American migration corridors at level 2, where migration corridors refer to the flows from a country of origin to a country of destination. In total, there are 250 corridors, 90 intra-regional and 160 interregional corridors. Given that the data cover the period from 2000 to 2019, this implies that the data set is or has 5,000 entries. So to solve all of the problems that using residence permit data implies when estimating migration flows, we define a three-level Bayesian hierarchical model, which is a generalization of the model proposed by Reimer et al. In 2013. Basically, the resulting estimates from this model are the true and observed bilateral international migration flows, where a migrant can be defined as a person who changes his/her place of residence permanently. So as an input for the model, we have like our observed residence permit data. Then the first level of our three-level Bayesian hierarchical model identifies the permanent and temporary flows. The second level of our Bayesian hierarchical model corresponds to a data model. And this model corrects the residence permit data by the specific problems that South American data have, which means that this model corrects the residence permit data by accounting for the minimum timing requirements for each of the residence permits, the number of those migrants who don't need a visa to reside in the destination, And this model also accounts for those unauthorized migrants, which are then integrated in the statistics through regulation processes. And finally, well, this model accounts also for that data quality. The third level of our Bayesian hierarchical model is the additive mixed gravity model, which is the one that imputes the missing migration flows and overcomes the dependence of the imputation process on incomplete and unreliable auxiliary data. And actually, this part of the three-level Bayesian hierarchical model is the focus of this presentation. So for defining our additive mixed gravity model, we had basically three possible models using the terms that Pearson adopted in his paper. Our first model was related to a single common smoother for all of observations. Our second model was related to a global smoother plus corridor level smoother that have the same wiggliness. And the third one, in addition to the global smoothers and the group level smoothers, allowed like differing wiggliness. We didn't tested any model without a global smoother, given that our data have a lot of missingness. And basically this global smoother allows sharing strengths from the average trend of flows to corridors whose information is very poor. From the options of the models that we have, we expected that the model with the global smoother and the corridor specific smoothers with different wiggliness was going to be the best one based on this graph of the trajectory of the logarithm of flows across time by destination. So here you can find like some main results. Here we have three scatter plots which compares the observed values and the fitted values with 95% credible intervals. And as you can see, and as it was expected, the model with only the global smoother either overestimate small flows or underestimate big flows of migrants. The model with a global smoother and corridor specific smoothers with a shared penalty, in other words, with the same wiggliness, performs better than the G model. However, there are still some flows which cannot be imputed very well. These values correspond mostly to corridors whose data are very scarce or bad quality. For example, corridors which involves Venezuela suffer from this. The model, as in the circle highlights, the model with a global smoother and group-specific smoothers with individual penalties seems to perform better for corridors whose number of migrants is big. However, it starts overestimating small flows, like the circle is showing. And actually, with this model, there are problems of convergence. So based on this, we selected the GS model as the best model. And after that, we included the variables of the gravity model. The most common variables of the gravity model are population of origins, population of destinations, and a measure of distance. We selected contiguity as a proxy for a distance between the countries. So contiguity, the contiguity variable takes one when a pair of countries shares like a border and zero otherwise. Given that the gravity models are sensitive to the assumed measure of distance, contiguity was selected as a variable to reflect the fact that intra-regional flows in South America represent a large share of South American flows occurring between border cities or towns. Once we did this, we used the model with only these three variables, which didn't require any imputation, and the additive mix model. And then we compared the results with estimates calculated based on a linear mix model, which uses a lot of covariates as in Raymer 2013. So this specific model, linear mix model, includes variables of population, GDP, migrant stocks, language as well, whether like a pair of countries shares language. But the problem of this model is that all of the for some of these variables for South America, we needed like to impute data. And as you can see in the slide, basically based on the estimates calculated by the linear mix model, many of the flows are underestimated, while the additive mixed gravity model seems to replicate better the migration flows, the observed migration flows. Basically, we have like three main points as a conclusions of future work. The first one is that the additive mixed gravity model with a global smoother and corridor specific smoother with the same weakness or a shared penalties perform better than any other generalized mixed model that we tried. That the additive mixed gravity model performs better than the linear mixed model with variables, which not only require additional imputation, but usually refer to a limited number of factors, skewing the estimation of flows to mainly economic aspects. And the last one is that the more exploration of how to deal with corridors with poor data is needed, considering that the current GS model overestimates some flows.
Thank you very much for your attention. Here you have like my email if you want to contact me.